Good morning, and thank you for joining us at the MTRS for our virtual Ready for Retirement seminar. We've got two presenters today, Jennifer Catone and Jennifer Samalowicz, both senior retirement specialists at the MTRS, who will be walking you through the Ready for Retirement program. We do have a Q&A panel at the top of your screen. There should be a little button that looks like a question mark inside of a bubble. You can ask questions in there, and we have a room full of staff in the next room who are waiting for your questions and can answer them for you. We do ask that you please keep all your questions in general. Specific questions related to your account or your specific situation cannot be answered during this presentation. Please limit your questions to topics that have already been covered, and we will answer some questions live during specific points of the presentation. But due to the high volume of attendees and questions, we can't guarantee that we're going to be able to answer every question in real time. So if you have a specific question about your account, your specific situation, or something that you want to ask us, you can always go to our website and click on contact and send us an email, and we'll get that turned around in a few days and answer your question. So without further delay, here is Jennifer Catone.
Buttons aren't showing up. Good morning, everyone. So first, I'm just going to go over everything that we're going to cover today in this presentation. First, we're going to cover pre-retirement issues, including what you need to do and what you need to consider before you retire. In part two, we'll go over the application process itself. We'll have a step-by-step walkthrough of the process so that you'll know what to expect and when to expect it. And in part three, we'll address other retirement issues, including other topics that you need to be aware of as you approach retirement. So starting off, the MTRS is a defined benefit plan under Section 401A of the Internal Revenue Code. This means that your benefit is determined according to a set formula, and it's paid monthly for life. This formula is determined by your age, your years of service, and your salary. Fluctuations in the financial markets do not affect the amount of your benefit, and the pension fund is invested in a well-diversified portfolio, with a focus on long-term returns. So as of April 2nd, 2012, Pension Reform 3 in Massachusetts created a different benefit structure for new members of Massachusetts public retirement systems. This means that members who joined on or after that date have their benefit determined by slightly different factors. Because of this, the MTRS has two membership tiers, where Tier 1 members are those who joined any Massachusetts public retirement system before April 2nd, 2012, and Tier 2 members are those who joined on or after that date. This presentation is geared towards those who joined before that date, but it will still be relevant for those who are Tier 2 members who joined after that date. The examples that we do show in the slides will be for Tier 1 members. Please also note that if you ever refunded your account from the Massachusetts system and then later rejoined after April 2nd, 2012, you're now considered a Tier 2 member, and you'll have everything processed with different age factors. We'll use a 5-year salary average instead of a 3-year average, which we use for Tier 1 members, and the minimum retirement age for Tier 2 members is 60. And also please remember that if you refund as a Tier 1 member and later rejoin, you forfeit being able to use the Tier 1 age factors, the 3-year salary average, and the minimum retirement age. If you look at page 31 of your PDF, we have a side-by-side comparison of Tier 1 and Tier 2. There's also a retirement percentage chart for Tier 2 members on page 33. And on page 34, we have additional information on the age factors. So this is regular compensation. This is what's going to be used in your salary average at retirement. So another way to look at this is that these are things that we can and cannot use in your 3-year salary average. Things on the left are included and things on the right are excluded. So things that are always eligible are your annual base salary, which is in your CBA or your individual contract. So if you're a teacher on a 10-month contract, this will be listed in your contract that you're with your bargaining unit. You can usually find it near the end of the contract. It's a matrix that'll have salaries and maybe your years of service and your education level. This number will always be eligible. If you're an individual contract, an administrator, this will be the number that's in your contract that you receive every year. here. Also regular longevity. This is always considered included as long as it's listed in the contract. This would be something such as, say, after 10 years in the district, you're eligible to receive $1,000 extra. After 20 years, you may receive $2,000. They have to be in the contract, they have to be regular, and they have to be recurring. Some districts do have a one-time 3-year special longevity payment. It's sometimes known as elbow or enhanced longevity or alternative longevity. This would be something that you have to sign up with your district. You'd receive this special payment for 3 years, and then after that, you wouldn't be eligible to receive it anymore. This is not eligible for your 3-year salary average, but what you can do is have your regular longevity that you would have received invoiced and pay those deductions just to make them up, and you can use the regular longevity in your salary average. Athletic coaching or instruction. This does actually not have to be in the CBA, but it does have to be instruction of athletics. So it has to be something, it can't be like timekeeping or taking tickets at a gate. It actually has to be instruction of athletics, and it can be intramural. And annual payments for additional services pursuant to the CBA. These have to be listed in the CBA with the name of the payment and the amount paid. This could be something like the art club or yearbook or being a mentor. But again, these do have to be listed in the yearbook, in the CBA. They do have to have the name of the exact stipend or the exact club and the amount paid. And then one final thing that's not on that side but is eligible is hourly payments for breakfast or lunch duty. These are typically the only hourly payments that are considered eligible. And you have to be physically in the space with the kids during this period. Again, no other hourly payments are usually ever eligible. So things that are not eligible or that are excluded are things like retirement incentives. Some districts offer, if you let your district know before a certain date that you're going to be retiring, they may give you some kind of bonus. This is not eligible. Any sick leave buyback or unused sick leave payout or unused vacation payout is not eligible. Hourly payments with the exception of breakfast and lunch duty. Temporary salary augmentations. This could be a one-time bonus. Say that for 1 year you receive a 1% bonus, and that's not rolled into the base for the next year. This is not eligible. One-time payments or bonus payments. This could be something where you take on a special project that's not listed in the CBA and it's not quite related. It's just something that you're doing specifically for that year. It's a one-time thing. This is not considered eligible. Annuities and fringe benefits. These are things such as travel allowances or reimbursements or cell phone allowance or something like that. If you do see that these payments like this are having deductions taken on them, please talk to your payroll officer or talk to us, and we'll try to get that straightened out so that you're not having payments taken on something that's not eligible. And again, if you do see something that you think is eligible and it doesn't look like it's having deductions taken on it, also contact your payroll officer so that we can make sure that those are being taken. This is just to let you know, some people have logged in online to their account with MTRS, and they've seen that maybe their creditable service is not showing up. Don't worry about this. Progress is being made on these. We do have a bit of a backlog with some districts, and as things get reported, they get updated onto into your account. But please don't worry if you're coming to retirement and everything is not showing up. We don't use this for retirement and for calculating your creditable service. This is just to give you an idea of where you're standing. So we do always go back to the district and we get all the information. So don't worry if it's not showing up. This is not what we use. Okay. Purchasable service. Sometimes you might be eligible to make to increase your creditable service by purchasing service that you might have. This is we're going to tell you how to purchase that service and what is eligible. So there are 104 Massachusetts contributory retirement boards, and you may have taken a refund from them. Refund buybacks are considered eligible. These fall under Mass General Law, Chapter 32, and they're billed at the actuarial interest rate. That's currently 7%. So again, a refund buyback from either the MTRS or another Massachusetts retirement board. Massachusetts state or municipal employment. This could be something where you worked for the state, but in a non-teaching capacity. Maybe you worked for the Department of Transportation or you are a lifeguard during the summer for a community or something like that. These could be eligible for purchase. Massachusetts substitute or temporary teaching service. This could be being an aide or being a para or doing day-to-day substitute teaching, something like that. That is one of our most common applications, and we do get a high volume of applications for that. Out-of-state public school teaching could also be eligible if you taught in a different state in a public school. Non-public school teaching pre-1973 in a private school. This is different from another type of non-public teaching service, which we'll mention later on. Department of Defense overseas dependent school teaching. This is teaching that is out of the country, and it's usually on a military base, and it will require federal documentation. So the next set of service purchases is covered under Section 4 of the law, and it's billed at the buyback interest rate, which is half the year at the actuarial rate. So it's currently 3.5%. So military service, you must meet the Massachusetts definition of a veteran to purchase the service, and you will need to submit your DD 214 form. Non-public teaching in a Massachusetts publicly funded school. This is teaching service. It has to be teaching service, and the school must have received funding from the state or community. There are a host of other regulations going along with this one, but we don't have time to go over all of those. Vocational Education Chapter 74 Trade Service. This is the 3 years prior to getting your license. And then Peace Corps service is the final one. Again, this is Peace Corps and not AmeriCorps, which is not eligible. So in order to purchase your service, you must be active at the time that you apply or on an approved leave of absence of up to a year. There are 2 exceptions to this, Peace Corps service and refund buybacks. These are the only 2 where you can be inactive at the time you apply to purchase them. And one important thing to note, vocational service must be purchased at the date on the time that it's invoiced. You'll have 180 days to pay that. It can't be re-invoiced at a later date. So if you have it invoiced and decide that you want to wait a couple of years because you can't afford it right now, we can't update that invoice. That one has to be paid within the 180-day window. And all service that you've had invoiced that you want to purchase must be paid in full by your retirement date for it to apply to your retirement. Late payments might mean that we may need to push back your retirement date or delay your first check. So if you do have past service that you think could be eligible and you want to buy it, you should investigate purchasing it now. Some purchases can take a while to go through. Some things like non-public 401p can take a long time for our review process. And then sometimes we just have a large backlog for very popular applications. Also, things like rollovers and trust-to-trust transfers can take a while. They can usually take about up to a month to go through, or up to 60 days. So we do need to make sure that you follow up with your financial institution if you're paying that way, just to make sure that your payment went through before your retirement date. If you're currently on an installment plan and your retirement date is approaching, do contact us for your buyout invoice to get that paid off before your retirement date. So how do I purchase service? You can talk to us, or you can also see the first page of each application for an eligibility checklist. Go to our website at mass.gov/MTRS and go to forms. Most applications will have 2 parts. You'll complete the first part and your former employer will complete the second part. And then if you're submitting an out-of-state application, there is a third part that will be needed, must be completed by the retirement board that oversaw that employer. All signatures on these applications must be wet signatures. So you can fill out the information in the PDF form and print that out, but then you do have to print it out before you sign it and sign it in pen. After that, you will submit the application to the MTRS for processing, and we will send you an invoice. The cost is calculated typically as your earnings at the time multiplied by the applicable contribution rate. It will typically include interest that is compounded annually. And we do have special formulas for certain purchases such as vocational and military. If you pay by check, this will be a post-tax payment, so you won't be taxed twice on this at retirement. We will keep these two pieces of payments separate. So if all of your contributions will be paid, will be in as pre-tax, but anything after tax is considered separate, and you won't be taxed on that again. Rollovers can be made from an eligible pre-tax plan. And if you roll over, this is a pre-tax payment, so you will be taxed on that at retirement. You can also decide to pay with a 5-year installment plan, but please remember that this must be paid off by your retirement date. And also remember that some types of purchases do have a higher volume than others, so they might take longer to process. So please do be patient. So now, do we have any questions to go over right now?
Oh, yeah, we have one. Thanks to the team in the other room. They're keeping up with the questions. But the first question is, do the basics covered here apply to any member of the MTRS, for example, not a teacher? And do you have this type of presentation for non-teacher state employees?
So this is only applicable to people who are considered members. And if you're a member, this means that you're at least 50%. You are licensed for the position that you're working in. The position that you're working in requires licensure, and you're paid according to a contract. So if none of those apply to you, or not all of those apply to you, you're not considered a member, and so this does not apply to you. So if you're a substitute, an aide, a para, this will not apply to you. This is just for teachers and administrators who meet those criteria. We don't have presentations for people who are paras at the moment. Okay. So then, knowing the eligibility criteria, we do have two retirement plans with different eligibility criteria under Tier 1. Regular is if you're any age with at least 20 years of creditable service, or at least 55 with at least 10 years of creditable service. For Retirement Plus, you must have elected into R Plus or started after September 1st, 2001, and you were mandated into it. And then you'd have to be any age with at least 30 years of service, and at least 20 years of those are membership service. So that would be with the MTRS or the Boston Retirement Board as a teacher. With Retirement Plus, you get an enhanced benefit once you reach 30 years of service. You'll get an additional 12% tacked on to your base benefit when you reach 30 years, and then an additional 2% per full year after that. So you can see page 7 in your booklet. So once you hit 30 years, you get 12% added on. 31 years, you get 14%, 32 years, 16%, and it goes on from there. So these are our 3 benefit options. This is probably the biggest decision that you're going to make after you've decided to retire. This is where you'll decide how you want your benefit paid out and whether you'll have a survivor benefit. So we have 3 benefit options. Option A, you're given the maximum that you're allowed with your calculation. There is no survivor benefit with option A except for a small benefit for the partial month payment for the month in which you die that will go to anyone you choose. It's a partial payment for the month. So say you were to die on the 15th of the month, it would be the payment from the 1st through the 15th. It's better for that payment to go to someone than to just sit in the pension fund and not go out to anyone. So make sure you do fill that part out. Option B does allow for a survivor benefit, but it comes at a cost of about a 1 to 3% reduction from your maximum option A allowed benefit. Your beneficiary will get the remainder of your annuity account if there is any remaining when you die. So to explain, your pension is funded by both your personal annuity account and the pension fund, and as time goes on, your personal account is drawn down, and eventually your pension is funded entirely by the pension fund. There's no restrictions on your beneficiary designation for option B. And we do tell people that it takes about 10 years to deplete this account. So after that, there may not be anything left for your survivor. So option C does allow for a survivor benefit. When you die, your beneficiary receives a benefit for the remainder of their life. But this does come with the caveat that you will have about a 9 to 11% reduction from your option A benefit. This could be more, though, depending on the age of your beneficiary. Then when you die, your beneficiary will receive 2/3 of what your benefit was. Please remember that a child as a beneficiary will have a much greater reduction than someone closer to your own age. The older you are, the younger your beneficiary is, the greater the reduction. If your option C beneficiary dies before you do, you'll automatically pop up to option A and begin receiving your full calculated benefit. For option C, you can only name one beneficiary, and they must be either your spouse, your parent, your sibling, your child, or a former spouse who is not remarried. The reduction is based on actuarial tables that are calculated for us. You can find these on page 36. And it's also important to remember in retirement that your current active beneficiary does not carry over into retirement. So you may have received those forms that we ask you to fill out for your beneficiary that you've been receiving recently. Those are only for if you die before you retire. That person doesn't carry over. When retirement comes, you do need to redesignate a new beneficiary. And just in case you're curious, option B is our least popular option, as option A is the most popular. So the benefit calculation formula, the age factor is based on your age at your date of retirement. You can find a table on page 34 of your PDF that shows these age factors. This factor is then multiplied by your years of creditable service, and this equals your allowed percentage of your 3-year salary average. If it's applicable, you'll then add your retirement plus additional percentage, and this will give you your total allowed percentage of your salary average, which is also your option A total. The maximum percentage that you can receive in retirement is 80%. So even if this calculation comes out to over 80%, you're capped at 80%. Then you would add your veterans bonus if it's applicable. This is $15 per year of service for a maximum of $300. And then this will give you your total option A allowance. Now we're going to go over a couple of examples. This is a regular retirement for Mary Educator, who's tier 1. She's retiring on June 30th of 2026, and she's chosen option A. So her age of retirement is 59, so her age factor is 0.019, and her years of creditable service are 35. So this gives her a base percentage of 66.5% of her salary average. She is in retirement. I'm sorry, she's not in retirement plus. So she's not receiving an additional bonus on top of that. So she's receiving as her base 66.5%. Now, her salary average for Mary Educator, in her case, her last 3 years are her highest consecutive years of salary average. These years do have to be consecutive. You can't pick and choose from your highest years, and we will work with you to figure out what those 3 years are if you're not sure. So then her salary average is $75,000. So we multiply that by 66.5%, and her annual benefit comes to $49,875. Now, Mary is a veteran, so she's going to receive the full $300 of the veteran's benefit. So we add that together, and her total option A allowance comes to $50,175 per year, or $4,181 per month. Now we're going to go over Tom Teacher, who is in retirement plus, and he's retiring on June 30th, 2026 as well. And he's picking option A. Now, Tom Teacher is 58 at retirement, so his age factor is 0.018, and he has 34.5 years of creditable service. So we multiply those together, and we get his base percentage of his salary average at 62.1%. Now, because he's in retirement plus, and he's got 34 years of service, we're going to add on 20% to his base percentage, and we're going to again have to cap that at 80%. So even though that would come to 82.1%, he's maxed out at 80%. He also has a $75,000 salary average, so we multiply those together, and we get $60,000 for his benefit. He's not a veteran, so we're not adding anything onto that. So he's going to end up at $60,000 per year for option A, or $5,000 per month. Now, one important thing that we do want to go over is health insurance. We don't actually administer your health insurance here at the MTRS. All that we do is withhold what your district tells us to, but we do want to give you a little bit of information so that you can make sure that you're prepared. We recommend planning about a year before your retirement date for your insurance. There are 2 ways that someone can receive retiree health insurance. It's either going to come from the GIC, or it's going to come from your town or city directly. First, within the GIC, there are 2 ways to qualify. If your city or town participates in the RMT program, which is Retired Municipal Teachers, then you'll have health insurance through the GIC at RMT rates. There's a list of these districts that participate on page 9 of your PDF. The other way to have health insurance is through the GIC municipality program, meaning that you currently have health insurance through the GIC as an active teacher. This means that you will have GIC insurance as a retiree. You should check to see if the retiree health insurance is any different than the insurance that you have as an active teacher. Sometimes the plans change or the cost changes once you become a retiree. Now, if you don't have health insurance through the GIC, then you should have it directly through your city or town. If you qualify for Medicare, you need to find out how that will affect your health insurance and what is covered and what isn't. To qualify for Medicare, you must meet one of the following eligibility requirements. If you qualify for a Social Security benefit, you're eligible for Medicare. If you're married to someone who is Medicare eligible, then you will qualify through your spouse. If you changed employers or started teaching after April 1st of 1986, then you've been paying a 1.45% Medicare tax, also known as FICA. And if you've paid that to Medicare for 10 or more years, that will make you eligible. Things that you need to investigate if you're eligible for Medicare is to ask if the supplemental insurance offered through your city or town is purchasable. This will cover things that Medicare won't cover. It's also called Medigap because it'll fill any gaps that Medicare might leave. And the last point on the slide here is to avoid penalties before your 61st birthday and contact Social Security to determine your eligibility for Medicare and when you need to apply for Medicare Part B. Medicare Part B covers general care and doctor's visits, but a lot of people don't know this and they don't sign up for it because they don't know what it is or they think they don't need it. We've been told that there is a 10% surcharge every year after your 65th birthday that you don't sign up for this. And you should also arrange with your district to have your premiums withheld from your retirement check. A final note about this is your insurance premium may not always be withheld starting in your first paycheck from us. This depends when we get this information from your district. And again, do we have any questions to over?
Yes, we have a number of questions. More than half of them are about Retirement Plus, R Plus, and what happens to the contributions and the refund if you don't hit 30 years.
Okay, so if you are in Retirement Plus and you elected into Retirement Plus before that date in 2001, then you will receive a refund of your contributions beyond your original retirement contribution rate when you retire if you don't hit 30 years. If you are mandated into Retirement Plus, meaning that you join the MTRS after that date in 2001, then you don't receive a refund of your contributions if you don't hit 30 years. You had to have opted in at that time period in order to receive that refund. Okay, that's it. Okay, so we'll move on then. Now, there's 3 basic steps for applying for retirement. This is just a little timeline that we like people to know about in order to, get started working on your application. About 6 months before, you'll want to go online, use our estimate calculator, review the issues, download the retirement application. You'll want to have about 5 months before you're going to want to complete your part and give part 2 to your payroll because they're going to have to fill out part 2 of the application and then return it. If you know that your payroll office is pretty busy or maybe they're backed up, you might want to get that to them a little sooner rather than later. It does take them a little bit of time to fill that out. And then about 4 months before, you should have received your Part 2 back from your payroll office, and you're going to want to submit everything to the MTRS. We do like to have your applications in 4 months before your retirement date to make sure that you're paid on time. If we do receive them after closer to your retirement date, 3 months or closer, you might not get paid on time. So if you go to our website, we do have a handy tool where you can estimate your benefits. This is just going to give you, again, a rough estimate. It's not going to be the exact number. So don't use this to, actually calculate your benefit. So if you go here, you're going to go to estimate my benefit, and you can put in various combinations of your age at retirement, your retirement date, your creditable service, and your salary average. So that way you can get an idea. Maybe you're thinking of retiring in June of 2026. Maybe you put the numbers in and it doesn't look like it's really going to work out. You can try June 2027, see if that seems better for you, and get a rough idea. Again, these numbers are not the numbers that you're going to be using. They're not the numbers that we're going to use. We're going to go over everything and audit your account. This is just to give you a rough idea of where you're standing. Then when you're ready, you're going to click over to Ready to Retire, and you're going to apply for retirement, and you're going to download the forms here. This will give you some more information about that, more than we've gone over here. And then, step 2 is going to be download the retirement application. You can find that right down there if you look at the bottom where it says to download the retirement application. This is the first page. This page you don't actually fill out, but it does come with the application. Just one thing that we do want to go over is you'll see that highlighted section in the middle. It's a light beige, orangey color. This is just the red section is highlighted because it's going over when you apply if you're inactive. If you're using a June 30th retirement date and you sent in your application on the following August 29th or later, August 30th or later, you're going to have your date moved to 15 days within the day that we receive your application because you're considered inactive. So you do want to make sure that you get your retirement application in before August 29th in order to be able to use June 30th as your retirement date. If we do receive it later than that, we're going to have to move your retirement date and you won't be able to use June 30th. So you will also lose out on 2 months of pension pay. So with that, I am going to move, give everything over to Jen, another Jen, and she's going to continue the presentation for you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Jen. Switching off Jen's here. Before we get into the retirement application, this might be a good time for you to get up, stretch out a little bit, move your legs, maybe just do one stand up, sit down type of thing. We are going to go through the retirement application page by page together, and it's really geared to kind of walk you through as a retirement counselor what we've seen from our retirees, where our most common questions come from, where we think it would be good for you to kind of focus and pay attention on when you're going through the application. So we will go through it together. We have it split up by each page broken in half. So please just focus and help, and this will really help you when you're downloading the application. So wherever you're at with the application process, please feel free to just follow along. This is our part 1, page 1. So this part 1 is the part that you fill out as a retiree. So part 1, section 1, this is our first area of the application. Under line A, you would indicate the type of retirement that you're going to be retiring under. As Jen went over, we have our regular superannuation formula, which was Mary Educator, and then Tom Teacher was our example for that Retirement Plus enhanced benefit formula. So you would indicate here what type of benefit you're applying for. And lastly, if you are applying for an involuntary termination, you would check this box here. Moving into line B is where you would indicate your date of retirement. Now, by law, if you are retiring at the end of the school year, you have to use June 30th as your date of retirement. So a lot of times the last day of school will be like the 22nd or something like that. But by law, you need to use June 30th for your date of retirement. Now, there are many situations in which June 30th might not be your retirement date. Maybe you have a birthday in the summer. Somebody might use their birthday in the summer as their retirement date because what that does is effective on your actual date of birth, you are then able to use that higher age factor. As long as you're under the age of 65, it would benefit you to use your birthday in the summer months to get that higher age factor in the calculation of your benefit. So if you are intending to use your birthday as your date of retirement, please in line B, you would indicate your specific date of birth there. You can also retire at any point throughout the year. Everybody's situation is different, so it doesn't have to be the end of the year. We do have many people who retire at mid-years or various points in the school year as well. So just something to keep in mind. Under line C is where you would indicate your last date of employment. So if you are working through the end of the school year, again, this will be June 30th of that school year that you're retiring from. If you are working through the end of the school year and you're on a 10-month basis and you're using your birthday in the summer, you would have your birthday under line B, but under line C, you would use the last date of employment or the last date of separation, which would be June 30th in that example. So these B and C can be different, and if they are, that is okay, and it's very normal. And lastly, if you're applying for a disability retirement, you would indicate that here under box D. On the bottom half of page 1 is very self-explanatory. It's your basic demographic information. However, there's a couple things that we just want to point out here that oftentimes might get overlooked or just are very important. On the left-hand side, you'll see a couple of check boxes. These check boxes, as well throughout the application, you'll notice that there's a lot of language in the margins here on the left-hand side. And that language is really the areas that we think might serve our members better for us to further explain for you. So the first area that you'll see this is here on page 1. And these checkboxes are the additional supplemental information that will need to be handed in with your retirement application. One of them being a legal document showing your name change. Typically, this is your marriage certificate, but if you ever had any legal name change, you would want to provide us with that legal document. This can be a photocopy for the legal name change information. We would need your birth certificate also submitted with your application. This does need to be a certified raised seal birth certificate. We cannot accept a photocopy for your birth certificate, and we will get into it, but when you are selecting your option C beneficiary, we would also need the original raised seal birth certificate for that beneficiary as well. And the last checkbox here is if you are a military veteran, then you would need to submit your DD-214 form along with your retirement application. Moving to the middle of the page here on the right, you'll see underline F is where you would indicate if you are a veteran or not. Simply check off one of those boxes. Your mailing address, very self-explanatory. And the last thing I need to point out on this page is the bottom line J is the email address. Please, when you're filling out your retirement application, please use a personal email address. This way, if there's anything that is missing or any issues that come up post-retirement, once you no longer work for the school district, you would not want to use your school email address on this line because then we would have no way to contact you if your school email is no longer valid. Moving on to page 2. Page 2 underline K is where you would indicate the school district that you're retiring from. If you're only employed under one school district, you would only have one school district indicated here. Underline L is where you would indicate if you are a dual member. If you don't know what a dual member is, chances are it doesn't apply to you, so you can skip line L. However, if you are a dual member and you are paying into one or more two or more contributory retirement systems, this is where you would indicate that additional retirement system under line L. And lastly here is line M is our special spousal benefit. This will be applicable to tier 1 members. And if you qualify as a beneficiary, or I'm sorry, as a retiree, and your spouse is a retiree from another Massachusetts contributory retirement system, and you meet the other qualifications, then essentially what this special spousal benefit does is it boosts your age factor up as a retiree in the regular calculation up to age 55. So this would only benefit you if you are under the age of 55 in that special situation. Now on the bottom half of page 2 is where one of 2 places that you will fill out your marital status within this application. You would indicate that underline N, your marital status, and then provide us with your spouse's information. On the left-hand side, you'll also see that there's those check boxes again. We do need, as indicated on the first page, same thing here, we do need a marriage certificate, which a photocopy is okay. We would need a domestic relations order if applicable. So underline R, Q and R is where you would indicate 1, if you have been divorced, and 2, if there's a domestic relations order that is in place regarding your retirement. So if so, you would check off yes, and then please send us over the signed court document for that domestic relations order. And then underline S is where you would list an alternate address. So maybe you're moving somewhere nice and warm for the summer after you retire. This is where you would want to put that in for us, putting that start and stop date to ensure that post-retirement, all the correspondence needed to will get to you without any issues. And then lastly, underline T, this is a small question, but it does need to be answered in order for your application to be considered a complete application. If you've ever been convicted of a criminal offense in relation to your Massachusetts public employment. On page 3, as Jen mentioned, your salary average goes into the calculation of your retirement benefit. This is a kind of a checks and balance page just to make sure that what you think are your 3 highest years are in fact what we're going to use in the calculation of your benefit. You will see a similar grid like this on the part 2 of the retirement application that goes to your payroll officer. And essentially they're filling out the same exact information as you. And this is to make sure that we're all on the same page, ensuring that we're using your highest 3 consecutive salary average, highest 3 consecutive salaries within the average of your benefit payout. So in this example, the Mary Educator's three highest consecutive years are going to be her 25, 26, 24, 25, 23, and 24 school years. So she would list out the contract years there, and these are just the school years of which you were contracted. And then on the right-hand side is where you would put what type of contract you are covered under, whether it's a collective bargaining agreement, if you're a teacher covered under the CBA, or if you have an individual contract, you would indicate that here. Now, if you do have a collective bargaining agreement, but the contract is not yet settled yet, which oftentimes this does happen, you would just indicate that under line B. And please note that it's not going to mean that you are going to receive anything less as a retiree. If once the contract does get settled, if your school district pays you out that retro payment for the difference of what you should have been paid under that settled contract, then they will send us that appropriate information over so that we can do a recalculation of your benefit if your benefit has already been processed. So you won't be losing out on any money. We do want you to get the best benefit possible that you can get. And at the bottom of page 3 is our first area that we're going to see a signature. When we are looking for your signatures, we need the original wet signature. And what I mean by that is that we cannot receive any photocopies of your signatures. So if you are filling it out online, it might have a signature option for you to use. Please don't use that. We need it to actually be a handwritten signature with the ink of a pen in order for it to be considered a acceptable application, since it is a legal binding document. So you might hear me say that throughout the presentation. That is what I mean by wet signature, original wet signature, not a photocopy or a computer signed. At the top of page 4, we get a lot of questions about this one because there's a lot of information on it. It's a little bit overwhelming. And we are not asking you to take a deep dive into everything. What this page is used by the service representative who's processing your benefit is really a checks and balance page. We're trying to make sure that the service credit that we have for you in our system is in fact what you think that you're credited with when we're going to process your benefit. The first half of this page is what you'll see over here under line A. It just lists out all the different types of possible service credit that you can have with the MTRS. A lot of it is what Jen had gone over with the different service purchases. Everybody, when you're filling out this, should fill out that first checkbox because it's regular Massachusetts public teaching service, which you need to have that in order to be able to retire with us. So you would always check off yes there. And then the rest is really just fill it out to the best of your ability. Use it as a checklist to see if maybe there's any additional buybacks that you can complete prior to retiring. And line B is really just a deeper dive into that top section A portion. We're asking that you now break down that service that you indicated on the top portion into a more personalized version, a history of your service with the MTRS, if you will. Just break it down by service or by employer. You do not need to break it down every single school year. Just by employer and school year, dates of service can be approximated. Really, this is just to the best of your ability. And on the right-hand side is where you will see creditable service, the status of it. So if you've already been credited it, if you plan to purchase it, or if you don't plan on purchasing it. And then on the bottom, the final thing here on this page is your total years of service. Now, if you're putting 33.4 years, but when the retirement counselor is going to process your benefit and they only have 30 years of service, that will that will be cause for a phone call for you. We would want to call you and say, okay, well, where are you getting these 3 additional years? Because we would have you at a much lower benefit than what you think, or vice versa. If you had yourself as much less, typically you won't get a phone call if it's much higher, but it would be a pause for the counselor just to do that additional cross-reference to make sure that everything's all accurate when we're going to process your years of service. At the top of page 5, and before I get into page 5, actually, I do want to just reiterate, page 5 sometimes can be left blank. Page 5 consists of any leave of absence information, workers' comp information, or military service. So if you've never had any leave of absences, you've never had any workers' comp, and you've never had military service, this page can be left blank, and that is okay. That is very common. However, if you have had leave of absences, you would fill that to the best of your ability under line D, just indicating the approximate dates of service so that we can cross-reference it with your account. If you've ever been out on workers' comp, again, under line C, you would fill it out under the appropriate section, either 34 or 35, for the type of workers' comp payments that you received. And then lastly, under line F, if you ever had any military service, then you would indicate that here on the bottom of page 5. On to page 6, this is your direct deposit authorization form. By law, you are mandatory to have your retirement pension checks directly deposited into an account. It can either be a checking or a savings account. If you're having it deposited into a checking account, we would need a voided check for that checking account, or a letter from your bank indicating the checking account information. If you're having it deposited into a savings account, similarly, we would need some sort of letter from your bank indicating your savings account information. Right below where it says savings account, you'll see a little red that says response required. The reason why this is in red is because it is probably one of our most common areas of our retirement application that is skipped over. The question is, if you're having your payments forwarded to a US bank and then forwarded to a bank in another country. A lot of times the answer is no, but if this is not properly checked off yes or no, then we will send it back to you as an incomplete application, because we do need to know for financial purposes what your intentions are for this direct deposit. So if it's just staying in the US, click off no there. And then lastly, you would indicate the type of ownership on the account, if it's an individual joint account or a trust account that it's getting deposited into. If it is going to be a joint account, under section 5B is where you would indicate your joint account information. The person who is a joint account holder with you does need to sign and date on the middle of section 5B here. And their signature also does need to be an original signature as well. Section 5C is essentially you signing off that the direct deposit information that you're providing is accurate and how you want to receive your pension checks going forward. Before I move on to page 7, I do just want to let you know that if you have a change in banks, or if you need to change the type of direct deposit that you are receiving after retirement, we do have forms on our website that you can print out and fill out a new direct deposit form. It will look very similar to the one here on page 6. Page 7 and page 8 kind of go hand in hand. Jen had walked you all through the different retirement options. We have 3 options, A, B, and C. And this is page 7 is where you would select that option. So on page 7 is where you as a retiree would select that option. You would check either the box option A, option B, or option C. If you check off an option A, but then fill out information under option C, your application will be sent back to you. So please be very mindful when you are filling out these pages. This is our second most common reason why applications get sent back. So when you're going through, select your different retirement option of which you're going to retire under as a retiree. And then on the bottom of the page is where you are signing and dating that you are choosing to retire under option A, B, or C. If you're choosing option C and option C only on this page is where you would indicate your option C beneficiary information, providing their relationship to you, date of birth, and their social security number. And additionally, as I mentioned when we were going over page 1, if you are choosing beneficiary, we do also need their certified raised seal birth certificate as well, and a marriage certificate indicating their relation to you if they're your spouse. On the top of option A, on the top of page 8 is where the second place of which you will fill out your marital status on this application. And you would just indicate, check off any box that is applicable to your marital status, and then you're signing and dating that marital status information, again, original wet signatures. On the bottom of page 8 is the spousal acknowledgement agreement. Essentially, the purpose of this page is that your spouse is saying that they acknowledge and they know that you chose option A, B, or C, and they're signing off that they're in agreement with it. And then right below it is a witness signature. That witness, the purpose of that witness is that the spouse has appeared before them and made acknowledgement of your option selection for your retirement benefit. Now, the reason why these 2 pages are so important is because after you retire, you do not have the ability to change your option. So it is important that with the dates on all of these and the spouses are both on the same page when it comes to the processing of your benefit, because once it is processed, it cannot be changed. One of the main reasons why these pages do get sent back is due to the dates. So the spouse date and the witness date need to be either on or after the date of the member's signature on page 7. And you'll see all these red exclamation points and everything in the margins on the left-hand side. And that's to help remind you and guide you when you're working through the application of those, the importance of those dates. On the top of page 9 is where you would indicate your option A beneficiary. Please note that the percentages all the way on the right-hand side, the total will always need to equal 100 when you are, if you're listing more than one option A beneficiary. Similarly, with option B, the total would have to equal 100. And at the bottom here, you will have a contingent beneficiary. This is only for option A and B retirees. You would list a contingent beneficiary, and what that is that upon your passing, if your option A or B beneficiaries were to predecease you, the payment that is due to those survivors would be paid out to the contingent beneficiary. And the final page of the retirement application for part 1 is page 10. This is an acknowledgement form, if you will. So the first portion of it is an indication of the W-4P form. The W-4P form is the IRS form that we use that you indicate at what rate you want your federal taxes withheld. You can either complete the form, which you'll see in the next slide, or you can check off the second box in that second box option here, indicating that you want your taxes withheld at the highest possible rate. And then the box right below it is just checking off that you are knowledgeable of the working after retirement restrictions and limitations. If you are not yet knowledgeable, that's okay, because we're going to get into that in just a little bit. So after this presentation, you will all be masters at the working after retirement limitations, and you can very proudly check off that box. And this is the last or second to last page that you will sign and date original wet signatures. The bottom of this page is really just a checklist. You can go through it as you're going through your retirement application, or once you're gathering up all your data or all your documents at the end, once you've already completed your application. This would be a good checklist for you to make sure that you have all that supplemental paperwork and documentation along with the retirement application. Here is the IRS W-4P. This is the form, this is the instructional page of the form. We are not tax professionals here, and this is the IRS's form, so please utilize this instructional page. And then once you get to the actual form, I will walk you through the main parts of this form, but if you have any questions, this again is not our form. So on step 1, you're going to enter your basic demographic information. Underline C is where if you want your taxes withheld based off of the set tax table, you would indicate that there. Under step 2 is any additional incomes, you would fill out that information on the right-hand side there. And step 3 is if you had any other dependent or any other credits that you would need to indicate for your tax purposes, you would indicate that under step 3. And lastly, step 4 is any other adjustments or additional withholdings that you want for your federal taxes would be indicated under step 4. The final step 5 would be your signature and date to sign off that that is how you want your federal taxes withheld. If at the time after retirement, if you need to make any adjustments to your federal tax withholding, similarly to the direct deposit, you do have the ability to go on our website, print out a new form and send it in to us. You can update this at any point throughout retirement. And your final responsibility for the retirement application is part 2 of the retirement application, just the top part. You're going to fill this out and then send it over to your employer. For part 2 of the retirement application, a lot of times it will just maybe be only one school district. If that school district is your last 4 years of service and they are the ones that you're retiring from and they are the ones that have your 3 highest consecutive salaries, then you would only have one part 2 that would be sent to the MTRS. Now, if you have a different situation and maybe you're 50% in one district, 50% in another district that you're retiring from, that might be a case, or that would be a case that you would submit 2 part 2s. So if you are 50% with Sturbridge and 50% with Worcester, then you would need a part 2 from each of those districts filled out by their payroll, sent back to you, and then you would need to send both part 2s to us. Another situation would be if you were an administrator or if your 3 highest consecutive salary is in another district than the one that you are retiring from, we would need part 2s from that district that you're using your salary average from and this district that you are currently employed by and retiring from. When you go to finalize the retirement process, part 2 again gets sent to that prior employer. Once they fill out the part 2 of the application, they will send it back to you. Your job then is to review the information that they sent over to you, make sure that it makes sense to you and that everything is correct to your knowledge, and then you would marry that along with your part 1 of the retirement application. When the district fills out part 2 of the application, a lot of times they will include the collective bargaining agreement or any contract pages that are pertinent to your retirement or any individual contract pages. They will include that when they send it back to you. If they don't, it is your responsibility to obtain those contract pages to ensure that it's submitted with your retirement application. And then once you gather up that part 2, the contract language, your part 1, and any other additional documentations, please make a photocopy of it for your records and then send us, the MTRS, your original copy and both parts 1, 2, and all the supplemental information. Once we review your application for completeness, once it gets in-house, we will send you out either an acknowledgement letter letting you know that it's here and that it's complete and everything is good, or we will send you out an incomplete letter letting you know if something is missing and how it needs to be fixed and where to send it. Once your application is marked as complete, we do process retirement applications on a first-come, first-served basis, giving precedence or with acknowledgement of a member's retirement date rather. So we process them on a first come, first served basis. So the sooner you get it to us, the sooner that the turnaround will be for you to receive your notice of estimated retirement benefits and your first check. If at any point throughout the process, even though throughout the documentation process, your application is considered complete, there may be various reasons that the retirement counselor may need to reach back out to your school district for some additional information. If that happens and it's going to cause a delay in your pension payment schedule, then the retirement counselor will reach out to you and ensure that you're kept in the loop of that process and obtaining that necessary information. Please note that our calculations do take up to 4 months to process or to calculate your benefits. So if you hand us in your retirement application that 3 to 4 month mark prior to, if you're a June 30th retiree, so if you're handing it in February or March, then our turnaround time is you will receive your notice of estimated retirement benefits and your first check the end of July. As a retiree, you're going to get paid at the end of every month for that month that you've been retired. So the end of July for a June 30th retirement would be the earliest possible date that you could get paid. Once your benefit is properly calculated and finalized, you will be mailed out a notice of estimated retirement benefits in the mail. This letter essentially breaks down the calculation of your benefit and then also provides you with the amounts that you will receive as a retiree. Most cases, you are going to receive your first check 4 months after your date of retirement, as I just indicated. However, if there is any delay in that first payment, you are not going to lose out on any money. So let's say you are a June 30th retiree and you don't file until July. You will still receive your notice of estimated retirement benefits and your first check 4 months from that July date. And your first payment will be delayed. However, that first payment will be an inflated payment and it will be retroactive to your effective date of retirement. You are not going to lose out on any money if you are a late filer, as long as you file within that 60-day window that Jen was discussing. And for your direct deposit, it is mandatory for your retirement payments to be direct deposit. However, if we do have a deadline within the month of getting those direct deposits entered in, and that is prior to our deadline of getting our final members paid for that month. So if for whatever reason the counselor is not able to get you paid or get you calculated prior to that first deadline, then what will happen is that your first payment will be a paper check that will be mailed to you, which is another reason why to please be sure that your address is correct with us and that you indicate any alternate address appropriately to us. And then we will send you your first check will be a paper check, but then any subsequent checks will be a direct deposit. Quiz time. How do you receive your retirement check? It is by direct deposit. It is mandatory. So you will get your first payment directly deposited. You, again, will get paid at the end of every month for that month that you've been retired, which is a little bit different than what you have now as an active member. And you will only receive a monthly statement from the MTRS under 3 conditions. Whether it is if there's going to be a change in the retirement allowance that you will be receiving as a retiree, whether the MTRS is sending out an announcement, we will in turn, we would also include the monthly statement paper copy with that, or every December at the end of, you will receive your end of year summary for that paper statement. I think we're going to pause for some questions.
Yeah, we do have a few questions, including a request to repeat the explanation for refunding R plus for folks who retire without 30 years of service.
Oh, sure. Yep. So as Jen mentioned, if you are, so there's 2 ways that you can participate in Retirement Plus. It's either if you were mandatory placed into Retirement Plus, that would be if you started service after 7101, you'd be mandated into Retirement Plus. And then you'd be mandated to pay that 11% contribution rate. If that is your situation, if you did not elect into Retirement Plus, then you are not due a refund of any contributions, because effective that date is when that 11% contribution rate went into place. There was no optional choice for you as a new member. However, if in 7101 you had already had prior service, whether with MTRS or another retirement board, and then you came and you continued service, you started back after 7101, or you had continuous service and you were given the option to elect into Retirement Plus. So for that example, let's say that you started your service in 1990. In 1990, you would be paying a 9+2 contribution rate. That 9+2 contribution rate member in 2001 would receive an opportunity to elect a one-time election to elect into Retirement Plus. If they elected yes into Retirement Plus, then as of that date, they would start having that 11% contribution rate deducted from their paycheck. If they elected no, then they would stay at the 9+2% rate. So what happens is if that member elected yes, but is not meeting the eligibility criteria of either the 30 full years of service or the 20 20 years of service of which are membership service, if they don't meet the eligibility for that enhanced benefit, but they elected yes, then they would receive a refund of the difference between the 11% that they are paying in and the 9 plus 2% that they would have paid in had they had not elected into Retirement Plus.
Right.
Hopefully that clears it up.
We have a number of variations, a similar question. This particular one is, if I have a retirement date of August 1st, when should I send in my application? There are many versions of this with different dates. So when should people send in their application?
So you want to send in your application 3 to 4 months before your date of retirement. So a very helpful tool that might, if for all of you that are asking of a date range, is on our website, right above where it was the online estimator, there is a retirement checklist. If you go in there and you indicate what your projected retirement date is, so if you know that you want to retire on December 31st of 2027, you can indicate that in that checklist area, and it will automatically populate out the dates of which you are loosely due to send in the retirement application, when you should be reaching out to your health insurance coordinator, things like that. So I think if there's a lot of you that have those questions, go on mass.gov/MTRS and check out that checklist option so you can get your personalized checklist to have your specific dates listed.
Can you explain how a mid-year retirement and that salary is calculated in the highest 3 years? Is it included even though a partial year will be worked?
Yes, absolutely. So if you're not retiring at the end of a school year, then you're not going to have 3 full years. However, when we go to calculate your benefit, we are still going to use your 3 highest consecutive salaries or your 3 full years. So if you were going to retire, so let's say in December of a month, you're going to retire in December. We would use 4 months of your salary that you're earning from September to December in the calculation of your benefit, assuming that that is one of your highest consecutive salaries. So we would use that 4 months of that, let's say the 24-25 school or 25-26 school year. We would use that 4 months of 25-26 school year. We would then go back to use a full year of the 24-25 school year, go back 1 more year to use a full year of the 23-24 school year, and then we will dip into the 22-23 school year to bring you to 3 full years. So we'll use 6 months of your earnings from the 22-23 school year to bring you to 3 full years of service. Or full years of salary. Sorry.
Last one for now. If your birthday is in the summer and you have, for example, 32.3 years of service, can you get to 80% before your birthday?
So if your birthday's in the summer, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure, yes. If your birthday is in the summer.
Yeah.
And you have, for example, 32.3 years of service. Can you get to 80% before your birthday?
So it would depend on how old you are. If your birthday is in the summer and you're under the age of 65, then it might benefit you to use your birthday as your date of retirement, because we would use that higher age factor in the calculation of your benefit. However, and I don't know if this is what the person asking the question is referring to, your service credit will stop accumulating if you're a 10-month employee as of June 30th, the end of that school year. So if you're a teacher working September to June, but your birthday is July 10th, you can use July 10th as your date of retirement, but the service credit that you will receive will be capped off as of that June retirement date. So it will be only 1 year of service credit that you will receive for that. You can only receive up to 1 year of credit within a school year. If you're an administrator and your contract runs over the summer, then you can gain additional service credit over that time period. But again, the 80% is based off of the set formula. So it would depend on what your age is at the time of retirement.
One last question. Many people have asked this, again, many variations of this question. If you submit your retirement application and then change your mind, can you rescind it?
Yes, absolutely. So you can rescind your retirement application up until your date of retirement. You have the ability to rescind your retirement application. Sounds good. All right, moving right along here. We're going to switch gears a little bit. We're moving out of the retirement application and we're going to get into working after retirement, which is very exciting. A little bit contradicting because we're gearing up for retirement, so we don't want to be thinking about working after retirement. Well, maybe some of you do, which is okay too. So we're going to go over the different restrictions and limitations for working after retirement. When it comes to working after retirement, there are no limitations if you are going into private sector service at all. If you are going into private or public sector service within another state, there are no limitations or restrictions. Or if you are seeking employment within the federal government, there will be no limitations on your hours you can work or your earnings you can earn. Now, where you will see those limitations come into play is if you are returning back to work after retirement into the Massachusetts public sector. There's going to be some limitations on your hours and your earnings. The first limitations, though, that we want to discuss is if you are returning back to work with the same employer, you do have to be separated from service with that employer for 60 days in order prior to being able to go back and work with that same employer. Now, if you're retiring in June and you're going back to work with that same employer in September, that is okay because that 60-day window is met over the summer months. So then you are all set to return back to work with that same employer in September. Now, if you're retiring February 1st and you're trying to go back to that same employer February 2nd, that would not work because you have to wait that 60-day period in order to return back to work with that same employer as a retiree. Another way that you can get around this restriction is if you are retiring at the age of 62 or above, and if you are retiring at the maximum benefit of 80%. So if you meet one of those two requirements, then you do not have to wait that 60-day window before going back to work with that same employer. Now, where we get into the limitations part is with the time, the hours that you can work, and the earnings that you can earn. So the total hours that you can work cannot exceed 1,200 hours within a calendar year. So we're looking January to December when we're looking at your earnings and hours limitations. Your earnings limitation is going to be calculated based off of what you would have received had you had not retired from that position. We subtract out what you are receiving as a retiree from the Mass Teachers Retirement System pension amount, and then this will leave you with your allowable earnings that you can earn for one full calendar year, January to December. After you're retired for one full calendar year, we are able to add on that increased limitation, the limit increasing of $15,000 to that allowable earnings amount. Before we get, and we're going to take a little bit deeper dive into that earnings calculation because the paragraph, it's a little bit hard to understand, but when you see the formula, it will be a little bit easier. But one thing I want to point out, it is not an either or situation. If you are getting close to that earnings limitation, but you're nowhere near it for the hours limitation, you do still need to stop working. So, and a lot of times we do see members that are getting closer for the earnings prior to the hour limitation there. So just keep that in mind. For the earnings limitation, we are going to use Mary Educator as our example here. So Mary, she retired on June 30th, 2026, and she retired from a position that paid $77,000 per year. Now, what Mary will have to do is she will go back to her prior employer and ask them what she would be making had she had not retired in 2026 in that school year of the 26-27 school year, what she would be earning in that school year. Now, if Mary, so they came back to Mary and they said $79,000 is what you would have been earning had you had not retired for the school year. And then this amount would need to include any regular compensation. So it would be your longevity, coaching, or any eligible stipends would be included in this figure that the district should give you. Now, from that, Mary would subtract out her gross MTRS annual pension amount, which is calculated out to $50,175. This will leave Mary with her allowable earnings for the calendar year of 2025 of $28,825. So this is the amount that Mary can earn from when she retires. So from July 2026 all the way through December of 2026. Now, starting January 1st, 2027, Mary can earn an additional $15,000 on that amount for her earnings limitation. When it comes to working after retirement, a district might have some difficulty finding somebody to fill a position, and they have the ability to apply to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education for a critical shortage waiver. If a district applies for a critical shortage waiver, what this does is it typically is a short-term employment, anywhere from 6 months to a year type of employment. And if you are somebody who is retiring under Retirement Plus, you do have to wait 2 years in order to be reemployed under a critical shortage waiver. So once you meet those 2 years requirements, then you couldn't be employed under a critical shortage waiver for Retirement Plus retirees. For regular retirees, under the regular formula, there is no limitation of when you can accept a critical shortage position. Now, under a critical shortage position, essentially what this is you as a retiree will not have to pay MTRS contributions on the earnings from that critical shortage position, and you will be able to simultaneously still continue to receive your earnings for your MTRS retirement benefit amount. These are not subject to the limitations for the critical shortage position. Some additional precautions that we just want to make you aware of when it comes to working after retirement is that the restrictions are applicable to any public service within a public school or a public agency, even if your employer isn't necessarily that public school or entity. If you are employed as a consultant or a leased employee, your earnings and hours are still going to be subject to the limitations that are set forth in the couple slides before. If you are getting near those hours or earnings limitations, you do have the ability to freeze your pension. Essentially what this is if you know that you're getting close, but you don't want to stop in that role that you currently have, then you can freeze your pension. It puts a pause on your pension amount. You can then continue to finish that position for that school year, and then at the end of that position, you can then resume back your MTRS pension. There will be no retroactive pay, however, it is a simple pause and restart for your pension amount. And lastly, if you were to exceed the allowable earnings or limitations, then the MTRS or your employer must recover those excess earnings that you received over those limitations. For the taxation of your benefit, the good news is that there will no longer be any state taxes paid on your MTRS pension amount. However, the bad news, and you know this, federal government never lets you get away, and there will still be subject to federal taxes. And you know this because we've gone through that W-4P federal tax withholding form. This is the area that you indicate how you want your federal tax withheld at the time of retirement. It will be taken from your MTRS on an after-tax basis. If you have any after-tax money within your MTRS account, and the reason why you would have after-tax money would be either if you had service that you contributed to the MTRS prior to 1988, or if you paid for any service purchases with after-tax funds. These are all kept and stored in a separate area within your account, and to ensure that we are not going to tax you twice on those earnings. And when you receive what's called a 1099-R, essentially this is the retiree version of a W-2. When you receive this 1099-R, there will be a certain box there that will indicate to you how much after-tax funds that you do have in your MTRS account. With that 1099-R, if you live out of state, you will receive a benefit verification form every other year. Essentially, it's just an alive and well check to make sure that you are still with us and you are still the one who is receiving your benefit, to avoid any possible pension fraud. And lastly, if you are moving to another state, we do just encourage you to check with that other state to see if your mass pension would be taxed by that other state. Social Security. On January 5th, 2025, Social Security Fairness Act of 2023 was signed into place. And this was really great for our members. WEP and GPO have historically reduced or even eliminated Social Security benefits for our teachers and other public employees. So now that this Social Security Fairness Act came into play, it completely repealed those two different offset provisions and is no longer impact of your MTRS pension amount. If you have any specific questions about Social Security, we do encourage you to reach out to them in regards to your eligibility or how to file for it. SSA.gov, their website is also very helpful with a lot of really good information. Okay, and let's on another positive note, your cost of living adjustment. After you are retired for one full calendar year, you are eligible for a cost of living adjustment. This does need to get approved by legislature each year. Typically it does. And what this cost of living adjustment is it's 3% or the consumer price index, whichever is lower on your first $13,000 of your retirement benefit. It's a maximum increase of $390 per year. It's not much, but it's still something. I think we're going to see if we have any other questions before we end for the day here.
Yep, we have one more. If you apply 4 months ahead of time and are approved for June 30, do you get your first check at the end of that month or 4 months later? I was confused about it takes 4 months to get your first check.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you for the question, because somebody else might have the same question as you. So you will receive your first check 4 months from when we get your application in-house. So you are not going to, if you're a June 30th retirement and you filed on time that three to 4 months prior, your first check will be received 4 months from when we receive your retirement application. So if you are considered an on-time June 30th retiree filer, you will get your first check the end of July, and it will be for that month of July. The earliest possible date for any June 30th retiree is to receive their first pension check would be the end of July, because technically this is your first month that you would have been retired for. It's because you get paid at the end of each month for that month that you've been retired. Hope that clarifies. Good.
Okay. So we do have several questions still in the chat that our team is working on.
Okay.
We don't have any other shared questions at this time.
All right, sounds good. So I think that's it for us here. Thank you all for taking your time and taking your time out of your vacation to join us here. And we hope it was very knowledgeable for you all, and go back to enjoying your last couple of days of break. And I hope the weather is beautiful. Thank you.